Hello and welcome to Weekly News Highlights. Let's begin with the keywords that made headlines this week. South Korea marked the 76th anniversary of the Korean War on Thursday with President Lee Jae-myung honoring veteran sacrifices and pledging greater support for those who served the nation. The 21st Jejuporam for Peace and Prosperity brought global leaders together under the theme Reinventing Cooperation in a Fragmented World. South Korea is accelerating plans to secure its next semiconductor manufacturing hub outside the capital area as it seeks to maintain its global lead in AI memory chips. South Korea marked the 76th anniversary of the outbreak of the Korean War on Thursday with President Lee Jae-myung paying tribute to veterans and pledging stronger support for those who served and made sacrifices. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
The South Korean commander-in-chief commemorated the outbreak of the Korean War 76 years ago by attributing today's peace and prosperity to the devotion and sacrifices made by war veterans.
조국의 명운이 백척간두에 섰을 때 자신의 모든 것을 바쳐가며 전장을 누빈 영웅들의 고귀한 희생과 헌신으로 일궈진 것입니다.
President Lee Jae-myung vowed to bolster support for veterans and the bereaved families of those killed in the war, calling for extraordinary compensation for their extraordinary sacrifices. He also vowed to keep the peninsula free from any concern of conflict.
강력한 국방력으로 국민과 영토를 지키고 전쟁이 일어날 걱정도 싸울 필요도 없는 진정한 평화의 한반도를 반드시 만들어내겠습니다.
Lee also thanked the UN veterans, adding that their solidarity evolved into today's steadfast partnership with South Korea, and that the country bears a responsibility to repay the debt of gratitude it owes them.
유엔 참전 용사들의 한국 방문 초청을 비롯한 보훈 외교를 더욱 확대하여 참호 속에서 싹튼 영대의 정신이 미래 세대에도 살아 숨쉴 수 있도록.
On Thursday, the government confirmed awards for 3 members of the non-regular forces whose distinguished service during the Korean War had not been fully recognized. Later in the day, the president met surviving veterans for a feast to honor their devotion and sacrifices, noting South Korea's elevated global status today and the veterans' devotion along the way. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang.News.
As South Korea commemorated the 76th anniversary of the Korean War, a veteran in his 90s shared memories from the front lines and donated a collection of handwritten records to future generations. Our Kim Bo-kyung has the story.
Private First Class Han Hina served in the Korean War as a member of the Reconnaissance Company under the Armored Battalion of the Capital Division. Born in 1930 in Hamgyeong-bukdo Province, he dreamed of becoming an engineer, but when the Korean War broke out, he fought in the Rock Army, hoping he could one day pursue his dream in a free, democratic country. He has weaved together fragments of his memories from the war that he personally experienced and published a book.
It wasn't just once or twice. I survived many times when I could have died. And even I think it's a miracle that I'm still alive. I believe I faced those moments bravely and fought hard to stay alive. I wanted future generations to learn about sacrificing for their country.
And beyond that, the man, now in his 90s, recently visited the Army Archives Management Group to donate handwritten records of battles he went through. Since 2020, it has been gathering and restoring more than 81,000 Korean War military records, with around 50,000 have been restored to date. The war veteran took a look at the restoration process and thanked the archives for their efforts and for a chance to visit the place.
The records of the Korean War contain the sacrifice and dedication of those who served before us and are an important part of our national heritage. We will preserve these records and pass them on to future generations.
Veteran Han visited the Army Headquarters Hall of Honor and found the name of Staff Sergeant Kim Byung-chil, his superior and comrade who died in his place during the Battle of Sandugoksan, one of the major mountain battles on the eastern front of the Korean War. As he gently touched Kim's name and seemed to recall those days, he saluted with respect, with tears running down his face. The memories of a war veteran, preserved through his records and writings, can help future generations understand history and reflect on the meaning of patriotism. 김보경, 아리랑뉴스, 계룡.
Korea is stepping up engagement with the global South through a new civic diplomatic platform focused on development cooperation based on Korea's own grassroots experience. Our senior foreign affairs correspondent Oh Se-young has the details.
A new diplomatic network has launched in Seoul as Korea looks to turn its development model into a stronger bridge with the global South. Diplomats, academics, and development practitioners gathered at Yonsei University in Seoul for the inaugural meeting of the Semi-Diplomacy Group, or SDG.
Through this platform that we launched today, we can have continuous, permanent engagement through this diplomatic platform, both offline and online.
The initiative builds on Korea's Semi movement, launched in the 1970s to modernize rural communities and improve living standards outside Korea's fast-growing cities. Based on the spirit of diligence, self-help and cooperation, the movement is now widely cited as part of the grassroots foundation behind the country's rapid economic rise. More than 50 model villages have since been established across 11 nations. Officials and community leaders from more than 100 countries have also visited Korea to study the approach.
And I believe for Tanzania as well, Semal movement can be adopted in our own villages, but our own communities as we are coming together. We have a 2050 vision of development. I think cooperation, diligence, and self-help are things that will help us. And
around 40% of the population of Honduras is rural. Semal Undong, it's a component that can drive change in our country. So people-driven and community-centered approach that Semal Undong develops through the capacity building in communities is one of the aspects that can be strengthened.
The initiative comes as Seoul broadens engagement with emerging economies across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Park says the model is not just about rural development, but about human foundations needed for countries to adapt and grow in a changing economy. He says those foundations include education, mindset change, leadership, and civic values.
So Semal Undong has all these ingredients. So when villagers and leaders and also specialists, they learn and adapt Semal, they can benefit in these 4 areas. And these are what is necessary in the age of AI.
Last month, President Lee Jae-myung visited the Korea Sema-Undong Center, marking the first such visit by a progressive president. He called for a significant expansion of overseas programs as part of Korea's development cooperation efforts. The new diplomacy group aims to elevate this development approach onto the agenda of the 2028 G20 summit to be held here in Korea. Oh Se-young, Arirang
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has vowed to further bolster the country's nuclear capabilities while stepping up criticism of South Korea and carrying out a sweeping reshuffle of senior party officials during a major ruling party meeting. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
North Korea has once again reaffirmed its commitment to expanding its nuclear arsenal. According to the Korean Central News Agency on Tuesday, the ruling Workers' Party of Korea convened the second plenary meeting of the Central Committee for 3 days on June 20th to review the progress of decisions made at the 9th Party Congress in February. Presided over by leader Kim Jong-un, the meeting emphasized the regime's commitment to expanding and strengthening its nuclear forces and fully exercise its self-given status as a nuclear-armed state. Kim further ordered an increase in powerful defense assets without pause, with a goal of dominating the world, and to proceed with the construction of a 10,000-ton strategic guided missile cruiser. On foreign affairs policy, the North again labeled the South as its most hostile state and criticized this month's South Korea-U.S. Nuclear Consultative Group meeting, claiming the allies are expanding their military capabilities, including through Seoul's pursuit of nuclear-powered submarines. Regarding the plenary meeting, a Unification Ministry official noted that an unusually large share was devoted to national defense and foreign affairs. An expert agrees, adding that while the message towards South Korea remains in line with the two-state policy, its hostility has intensified. He attributed this to the war in the Middle East.
Unlike everywhere else, North Korea feels an exceptionally high level of security threat. So the need to justify strengthening its military capabilities by pointing to external threats is growing.
Meanwhile, there was a major leadership reshuffle with Cho Young-won elected secretary of the party's central committee while removing Kim Jae-ryong. The same expert explained this reshuffle is to root out corruption.
It appears that the party felt the need to strengthen its control over the military by raising early awareness of the level of corruption within the armed forces.
The meeting also highlighted coal as a strategic sector, calling for a nationwide overhaul of mining communities for broader economic development plans. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang.News.
Against a backdrop of growing geopolitical tensions and global uncertainty, world leaders and policymakers have gathered in Jeju to explore new ways of strengthening international cooperation. Our Moon Hye-yeon reports.
Gathered on the southern island of Jeju on Thursday, world leaders and senior diplomats confronted a question that has grown harder to answer with each passing year: how to rebuild trust and cooperation in an increasingly fragmented world. In a pre-recorded message, President Lee Jae-myung described Jeju as a place that turned historical tragedy into reconciliation, and said the forum's mission grows more urgent as wars and global challenges deepen. It is a mission the government is now taking more seriously than ever. This year, South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs joined as co-host for the first time. Speakers throughout the ceremony warned that no country can tackle climate change, artificial intelligence, or security threats alone. That warning found a sharp echo in remarks from UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres.
We meet at a deeply challenging moment for humanity. Geopolitical tensions are rising, conflicts are causing immense suffering, and it also means listening beyond the usual rooms of power, as you are doing in Jeju.
India's External Affairs Minister argued that fragmentation is now a permanent feature of the international landscape, but not necessarily an obstacle to progress.
This forum is discussing a fragmented world as a problem and reinventing cooperation as a solution. I agree with both the diagnosis and the treatment.
He argued that today's fragmentation is more complex than historical divisions, shaped not by clear strategic lines, but by intertwined forces of economic rivalry, technology competition, and eroding trust, all of which demand broader and deeper cooperation to navigate. That conversation carried into the following World Leaders session, where a panel of former heads of government debated where multilateralism has gone wrong and what middle powers can do to right it. Former UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon warned that the major powers are no longer communicating as they once did, while the former Indonesian president argued that middle powers cannot remain passive. They must actively use multilateral institutions as a counterweight to great power unilateralism. Throughout the remainder of the three-day event, sessions hosted by multiple organizations will tackle the topics of AI governance, regional security, and multilateralism in more detail. Moon Hye-yeon, Arirang.News, Jeju.
The future of UN leadership is under the spotlight at the Jeju Forum, where candidates for Secretary General are sharing their plans to restore confidence in the organization and reinvigorate multilateralism. Oh Se-young reports.
Multilateralism is dialogue in practice. At a time when conflicts, geopolitical rivalries, and declining trust in international institutions are testing the global order, contenders for the United Nations Secretary General have gathered on Jeju Island to share their priorities for the future of the World Organization. The special dialogue forms part of this year's Jeju Forum, livecast globally by Arirang TV. Against a backdrop of growing fragmentation, each candidate outlined priorities for strengthening the UN and restoring confidence in multilateral cooperation.
The UN is the beating heart of multilateralism, but has the responsibility and the legitimacy to bring all regions, all actors, banks, the private sector, and of course member states together to solve the current challenges of our times.
Rebecca Greenspan, chief of the UN Trade Agency, said a culture of partnership must be fostered.
The UN is unique, but it's not alone. So we need to include the private sector in the conversation, especially, for example, in the frontier of knowledge and the frontier of technology. for responsible AI and to close the gaps in the digital space.
Rafael Grossi, head of the UN's nuclear watchdog, emphasized that the UN should be the principal force for multilateralism.
At the end of the day, the UN continues to be the only sole global platform, because all these groupings, in all their beauty and effectiveness, cannot reflect global preoccupations. They reflect partial visions.
Former Chilean President Michelle Bachelet joined the discussion virtually, calling for the need to enhance dialogue and respect for human rights. In an interview with Arirang TV, former President of Senegal, Macky Sall, said multilateralism must be built on the foundation of the development agenda.
That is why we must place issues such as access to clean drinking water, electricity, resource development and employment of young people at the centre of the global agenda.
Opening the session, former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said the next leader of the United Nations will write an epic next chapter.
The next Secretary General of the United Nations will have the rare privilege of rebuilding shattered trust in multilateralism and demonstrating convincingly and concretely that the United Nations can still make a real, tangible difference in the lives of ordinary people everywhere in this world.
For more than 2 decades, the Jejuporum has served as a platform for dialogue to advance peace and prosperity. And this year's edition brings together these leading visions to restore common ground and cooperation in an increasingly divided world. 오수영, 아리랑뉴스, 제주.
Korea is rushing to build a second mega-scale semiconductor cluster outside the capital region backed by unprecedented state support. This would be the nation's second such project, with one in Yongin, Gyeonggi-do Province, already in the works. Joining us in the studio to discuss this further is our business and economy reporter, Kim Do-yeon. Welcome, Do-yeon.
Thanks for having me.
Right, so President Lee Jae-myung has met with the world's top 2 memory chip makers, which happens to be South Korea's very own SK hynix and Samsung. So can you tell us more about this?
That's right, like you said, it's reported that President Lee met with Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Jae-yong behind closed doors on Thursday, following a similar meeting with SK Group's chairman last week. As the world's leading memory chip makers amid the AI boom, the president is aligning with them to secure their commitment to this massive regional project. The core agenda is a second mega cluster for semiconductor production, driven by a massive corporate investment estimated at up to 400 trillion won, or about $260 billion US. To back this corporate funding, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources issued a legislative notice on Thursday. This decree provides the legal framework for massive state support. Crucially, the government promises to cover up to 100% of the installation costs for critical infrastructure such as power grids and water supply in provincial clusters. It'll also expedite licensing through a fast-track system and relax financial regulations, such as easing the strict separation of industrial and financial capital to help these companies secure the massive funding required from outside private equity.
So it does sound like the government is ready to provide substantial financial support, but obviously building these fab plants takes years. So is there any risk that the AI boom might die down before these factories even start operating?
Well, experts actually argue that not investing right now is actually the bigger risk. Global tech giants are pouring roughly 1,100 trillion won into AI infrastructure this year alone, triggering a fierce game of chicken in the memory chip market. In this industry, the winner takes all, and those who fail to secure a dominant position simply cannot survive.
We need to widen the gap so competitors cannot catch up. If you do not secure a leading position, you cannot survive. That is why expanding investments right now is absolutely critical.
And regarding the longevity of the boom industry, veterans are highly confident. Experts also note that the structural demand for these chips is built to last, dismissing concerns of a short-lived trend.
The ripple effect of AI
is immense, and there are currently very few alternatives to our existing semiconductor structures. For that reason, this chip demand will easily last for the next 10 to 20 years.
So that does sound quite promising. So let's talk about infrastructure. So why is the government looking to build outside the Greater Seoul area, and what exactly are the infrastructure needs for this project?
So the government is framing this massive expansion as a critical opportunity for balanced regional growth. The enforcement decree issued explicitly favors areas outside the capital region for new special semiconductor zones. President Lee Jae-myung emphasized that distributing this industrial weight away from Seoul is essential for long-term national development. Take a listen.
수도권의 기간의 핵심 인프라는 그것대로 고도화해 나가고 동시에 지방 곳곳에 새로운 산업 경제 기반을 구축해 수도권과 지방이 함께 윈윈하는 모두의 성장 시대를 반드시 열어가야 합니다. 이에 관한 구체적 청사진을 곧 국민 여러분께 보고 드릴 예정입니다.
As he said, this is absolutely not a cut down on the existing Yongin cluster that's currently in the works. Rather, the explosive AI demand is forcing Samsung and SK to accelerate their capital region construction plans by a full decade. With those timelines compressed to the mid-2030s, the Greater Seoul area will simply exhaust its available land, power, and water by 2035, which adds another reason to look beyond the capital region. Now, as for the new plan that's in the works, the official announcement is set to come out soon, according to the president, and reports say it'll be early next week.
All right, thank you for your detailed report today.
My pleasure.
SK hynix claimed the top spot among South Korea's listed companies, surpassing Samsung Electronics in market capitalization. Our Baek Ju-hee tells us more.
SK hynix dethroned Samsung Electronics to become the most valuable company on the benchmark Kospi based on common shares alone. Strong institutional and foreign buying supported the morning momentum, driving SK hynix stock to a fresh 52-week high. Fueled by this tech-led rally, the benchmark Kospi reached a fresh all-time high, closing at 9,114.55. SK hynix closed at a market capitalization of 2,080 trillion won, approximately $1.4 trillion, securing the top spot on the benchmark Kospi. At the closing bell, Samsung Electronics' market capitalization stood at 2,067 trillion won, or around $1.3 trillion, falling short of SK hynix by $8.45 billion. This marks the first time since November 21, 2000, that Samsung Electronics had slid to the number 2 spot in the domestic stock market by market value. However, Samsung Electronics still maintains the overall lead if preferred shares are included. When including Samsung preferred stocks valued at around 180 trillion won, or around $117 billion, its combined market cap remains higher than that of SK hynix. The historic shift was driven by SK hynix's significant market share in the high bandwidth memory segment as a crucial supplier to NVIDIA.
In particular, reports show that SK hynix has submitted its ADR listing application to the US SEC and is now awaiting approval. This anticipation seems to be drawing much stronger investor interest compared to Samsung Electronics.
In contrast, the impact of the AI boom on Samsung Electronics was relatively diluted. Because Samsung operates a highly diversified portfolio, including smartphone, home appliances, and displays, its overall corporate value responds more slowly to specialized semiconductor trends.
Competition will intensify as each company showcases its technological edge. Following today's reports that Samsung Electronics has shipped samples of its 12-layer HBM, we are seeing an accelerating technology race. Ultimately, however, the most critical factor will be which company NVIDIA chooses as its semiconductor supplier.
This intraday reversal carries significant symbolic weight, signaling a fundamental shift in market leadership. As the industry enters a prolonged AI-driven semiconductor supercycle, the market value battle between the two tech giants is expected to intensify. Baek Ju-hee, Arirang
South Korea is seeing a notable rebound in births, with the number of newborns reaching its highest level for the first 4 months of the year in 7 years. Baek Ju-hee reports.
A significant rebound is taking place in Korea's newborn nurseries. A total of 99,534 babies were born between January and April this year. Driven by an 18% spike in April alone, this marks the highest number of births for the 4-month period in 7 years, according to data released by the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Wednesday. 24,521 babies were born during the month of April alone, representing an increase of 3,734 newborns compared to the same month last year. The total fertility rate, which is the average number of children a woman is expected to bear in a lifetime, rose by 0.13 to reach 0.93 in April. This marks the 4th consecutive month the rate has remained above the 0.9 level since January. This increase is attributed to marriage rate hitting highest April figure in a decade. The number of weddings in April rose by 9% year-on-year to 20,622, marking the highest number for the month of April since 2016. In particular, the data shows that the recent spike was driven by women in their 30s. The birth rate per 1,000 women aged 30 to 34 increased by 12.7 to 86.8, while the rate for women aged 35 to 39 grew by 12.3 to reach 63.4.
The biggest reason behind the rise is last year's marriage boom. Marriage rates by age group were higher than in 2019, meaning they have fully recovered to pre-pandemic levels. A very large number of young people are choosing to get married.
The same expert warns that more needs to be done if this trend continues.
Given this steady increase, I expect the fertility rate to keep rising for at least 2 years. Still, health authorities must prepare thoroughly to prevent medical emergencies where pregnant women are turned away due to a shortage of beds.
The jump in cumulative births bring a welcome relief to Korea's population outlook. To sustain this newborn spike, Korea must now figure out how to create a safe medical and social environment for parents and their babies. 백주희, 아리랑뉴스.
That brings us to the end of Weekly News Highlights. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your weekend.